We stand here today at a critical juncture in our nation's history. This Shanti bill, which is before this House, has the government speaking grandly of harnessing the immense energy released by splitting the atom. Yet it seems to have failed to expend even a fraction of that energy in drafting a bill that is coherent, rigorous, and not full of loopholes. This is full of loopholes. Where the late Pandit Nehruji had laid the foundations for our nuclear program, and Dr. Manmohan Singh ji carried the Indo-US nuclear deal of 2008 across the last mile and lifted India out of isolation into an era of strategic confidence in nuclear power, this bill now confronts us with a disappointing reversal as a vision that once expanded horizons gives way to ambiguity, deepens uncertainty as to whether and where India's nuclear power framework is really headed. I have high regard for the Honourable Minister who is here today, but there are serious errors and omissions that other speakers have already pointed out. We have mastered nuclear fusion and fission, but not apparently legislative precision. The Shanti bill is a milestone, Mr. Minister, but for the wrong reasons. It is written with exceptions, heavy on discretion, and largely indifferent to public welfare. I am not sure, Mr. Chairman, whether it is a nuclear bill or an unclear bill. Now, before I outline my concerns, I must candidly state that the bill in its current form contains such fundamental structural flaws, as colleagues have pointed out, that it requires comprehensive reworking rather than cosmetic amendments. Ideally, it should have been referred to a committee, a standing committee or a joint parliamentary committee for further consideration. But if we are going to discuss it today, sir, let me enumerate my critical concerns. The very preamble of the bill, which I have here, characterizes nuclear energy as a, quote, clean and abundant source for electricity and hydrogen production. No quarrel there, and I'm not against nuclear energy myself. But this language is dangerously misleading because it completely neglects the serious, massive and irreversible risks from radioactive leaks, long-lived nuclear waste that remains hazardous for millennia, and, of course, the potential for catastrophic accidents. Moreover, India's usable uranium reserves are finite. While we do possess significant thorium-232, including in my own state of Kerala, and those are significant reserves, and we should work on them, nonetheless, thorium-based reactors remain decades away from significant deployment. The full life cycle of nuclear fuel, from mining to waste disposal, is neither clean nor sustainable. We must be honest with the people of India about what we are asking them to accept. Now, sir, Section 3(1)(c) and E provide that any other company or any person explicitly permitted by the central government is eligible to apply for a license to set up and run nuclear facilities. This effectively amounts to a blanket opening up of the entire nuclear energy sector, from mining to waste management, and this will open it up to a wide range of private actors with indeterminable and indeterminate qualifications. More troubling still, the bill allows for a single composite license for multiple activities across the nuclear fuel cycle. This means one entity could control mining, fuel fabrication, reactor operation, and waste handling. Such concentration of control in any single operator or corporate group heightens systemic risk exponentially rather than containing that risk. When profit becomes the primary motive across the entire chain, safety checks could be compromised at every stage. Such blanket opening up is potentially dangerous, and giving operational control of fissile and other highly radioactive substances to private entities driven by quarterly earnings reports and the bottom line of profit, I'm afraid, significantly increases the possibility of nuclear incidents and accidents. The core of the liability reform caps total nuclear incident liability at 300 million special drawing rights, which is approximately today $460 million or 3,900 crores. Let this sink in, honourable members. This cap has not changed in 15 years, despite inflation, despite Fukushima, despite everything we've learned. For context, the Fukushima disaster cleanup costs have already exceeded $182 billion. Okay? That's several hundred times the cap proposed in this bill today in 2021. Chernobyl's total economic impact exceeded $700 billion. Yet we propose to cap liability at less than $500 million? This is grossly inadequate when measured against the potential long-term health, livelihood and environmental costs of any serious accident. This is not a safety net, Mr. Minister. It is a trapdoor through which victims could fall into decades of legal battles and inadequate compensation. The bill also removes the earlier provisions where the operator had the right to recover compensation from equipment suppliers. This means that even if an accident occurs due to faulty design, substandard parts, or negligent manufacturing by a supplier, that supplier walks away while Indian taxpayers have to bear the entire cost. This might, in cases of serious accidents, strain our economy significantly. We are effectively subsidizing the risk for private international corporations while they retain all their profits. The state underwrites catastrophic risk, Mr. Chairman, while private operators maximize returns. What kind of law is this? Chapter 3, Section 14(1)(a) makes the central government liable where the liability exceeds the amount of liability of an operator. In effect, public funds, our money, taxpayers' money, will compensate for all the damages caused by private facilities. This provision does nothing but further dilute corporate accountability for systemic failures. And Section 42 overrides the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code for nuclear facilities. So nuclear workers are removed from our country's general labour safety framework. Is this fair, Mr. Minister? The bill imposes a 3-year period for filing compensation applications, with extension of the right to claim set for 10 years for property damage, 20 years for personal injury. Now, given the long latency periods of radiation-related diseases, cancers can appear 20, 30 years after exposure, and intergenerational genetic impacts, these limitation periods are, frankly, shamefully restrictive. They will exclude many genuine victims who develop serious health impacts only after years of exposure. Children exposed to radiation who develop leukemia at the age of 25 will find they have no legal recourse. This is not justice, Mr. Chairman. This is a statute of limitations designed to limit liability, not to compensate victims. इस बिल के हर वादे के पीछे एक कीमत छुपी है, मिस्टर मिनिस्टर, और अक्सर ये कीमत वही चुकाता है जिसका फैसलों में कोई हिस्सा नहीं होता। पर उन वादों की कीमत तुम क्या जानो सरकार, यही मेरी चिंता है। Here perhaps is the most egregious provision of all. Negligence by an operator or person is recognized as a cognizable offence, but only a person duly authorized by the central government or the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board can file a complaint. Let me stress this, sir. This means that if a nuclear facility operator is criminally negligent, affected communities cannot file a complaint. Civil society organizations cannot file a complaint. Even state governments cannot directly initiate criminal proceedings against the operator. This effectively excludes those most affected from seeking justice and concentrates gatekeeping power with the very institutions that have failed in prior oversight. By limiting judicial recourse and routing both civil and criminal actions. No, sir, I'm barely halfway through. You have taken 10 minutes. No, sir, I have been given enough time. You give me 5 minutes more. And criminal actions through central authorities, the bill restricts victims' access to ordinary courts and their fundamental right to seek effective remedies. For an ultra-hazardous activity that can devastate entire regions, such procedural barriers perpetuate a culture of impunity. Then Chapter 4, sir, on the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, essentially retains a regulator controlled by the central government, the same government aggressively promoting nuclear expansion, and its agencies, rather than creating a truly independent, multi-stakeholder authority that will be insulated from political and corporate influence. Sir, I can go ideally into clause-by-clause detail, but since you've already told me my time is running out, let me just sum up very simply. The entire regulatory arrangement is an inside job with little or no room for Indian civil society or even meaningful parliamentary oversight. Instead of clearing the fog around nuclear regulation, this arrangement thickens the fog. So Chapter 6, Section 44, grants perhaps the most dangerous power in the entire bill, as it highlights the excessive executive discretion and exemptions of this bill. It allows the central government to exempt any plant from the requirements of license or liability if, quote, the risk involved is insignificant, unquote. The term insignificant risk is not defined anywhere. It's left entirely to the executive. This provision essentially negates the entire framework of the bill, sir. It creates a backdoor through which any facility can escape oversight if the government deems it convenient.
Your point is
sir, give me 3 minutes. This kind of broad subjective exemption power undermines the very safeguards the legislation claims to establish. It will provide laxity in due diligence in a hugely critical sector. And private players will lobby for exemptions to engage in profiteering at the expense of public safety. We cannot justify this under any democratic framework. Multiple sections are granting sweeping powers on vague grounds. The bill lacks enforceable public participation mechanisms, no mandatory public hearings before licensing, no environmental impact assessment disclosure periods, no community consent mechanisms, no regular public reporting of safety inspections or radiation monitoring, no mandatory tabling in Parliament.
Kunalji, you have given 7 names.
Sir,
from your party, you have given 7 names. That's why I am requesting.
Sir, I'll conclude in 2.5 3 minutes. Sir, मैं जो डिटेल बोल रहा हूँ सर सब कुछ जानना चाहिए ये तो रिकॉर्ड में आना चाहिए सर
But 7
and finally sir, no mandatory tabling in Parliament of incident reports, internal or independent inquiry findings and periodic safety reviews. In other words, you're excluding the very people whose lives and livelihoods are at stake. And the past controversies referred to by other speakers at Jaitapur, Kuramkulam, Gorakhpur demonstrate what happens when communities feel excluded from decisions affecting their safety. This bill risks repeating those conflicts, undermining capacity expansion targets through local resistance and litigation. 2 more points, sir. Section 34B requires licenses, 35B, I beg your pardon, reserves spent fuel management for the central government, but again provides minimal implementation detail. When multiple private operators are generating significant spent fuel, unclear protocols will create operational uncertainty. The bill also lacks climate change provisions despite rising sea levels, extreme weather and water scarcity.
Thank you very much.
And post-Fukushima, sir, Japan comprehensively revised site selection for climate resilience. Our bill remains silent on that. I'll skip my other points. Let me give you one. Let me conclude, sir. Give me 1 minute to conclude. So I've taken up more than a minute in pleading for time. Give me time.
There are 7 members of Parliament from Congress Party.
I'm skipping half my point, sir.
There is a time constraint. Please kindly conclude. Please kindly conclude.
Sir, beyond safety, okay, I won't talk about safety anymore, sir. Fundamental questions arise about economic wisdom of this bill. Nuclear projects are highly capital intensive with long gestation periods. In an era of rapidly falling renewable costs, battery storage costs, we must ask, does 19.3 trillion rupees towards nuclear represent optimal allocation versus accelerated renewable deployment, grid modernization or energy sufficiency? The opportunity cost must be gone into, sir. The Shanti bill represents a dangerous leap into privatized nuclear.
धन्यवाद सभापति महोदय मैं एटॉमिक एनर्जी बिल 2025 शक्ति बिल के
We cannot allow the pursuit of capital to override the non-negotiable requirements of public safety, environmental protection and victim justice. The name Shanti means peace, sustainability. Let us ensure that this name is not a cruel irony in the aftermath of a preventable disaster.
I think so.
The promise of transforming India ought not to conflate the risk of scarring India.